Hi, good morning. Let me just get the YouTube going. And sorry, everybody. Okay. Let me figure out how to do this. 1 second. Let's see if it can go like this. Okay, good morning, everybody. I wanted to get the share started before I begin, because once I begin in this house, I don't know when I'll sit down again. So, starting Sunday morning early, Bezrat Hashem. Today's the 8th day of Nissan, and today's korban is Menashe, the tribe of Menashe, and the name of the Nasi, of the prince of the tribe of Menashe, has a really good name, Gamliel ben Pedatsur, which means God is gracious to me, and He is redeeming me. So it's a very good day, strong day. Bezrat Hashem. Let me read to you from to know the energy of the day. There's a lot of things that we can learn about the name Menashe and the tribe of Menashe. Half of the tribe of Menashe were on the other side of the Jordan River. Moshe Rabbeinu put them there because they were a very strong tribe in terms of loving Eretz Yisrael, and so he wanted to make sure that, because all the children of Yosef at Tzaddik, Ephraim and Menashe, loved Eretz Yisrael very much, loved holiness, and he wanted to make sure, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to make sure that Reuven and Gad would stay strong. So he put half of Menashe over there to make sure that they stayed strong in their Yiddishkeit, in their Judaism, in their commitment, in their holiness, etc., etc. That's why they were there. So on one hand, sorry, I'm doing this in a funny way. On one hand, Menashe had this strength and purity of Yosef Atzadik, and he was part of the teaching, or part of the sphere of Yesod, which is purity and emunah and sexual purity and all of those relationships. That's one part. On the other hand, Menashe, the word Menashe means to be abandoned. And Yosef Atzadik, when he named his son Menashe, which was the older son, he said, Hashem didn't abandon me in Mitzrayim in Egypt, and Hashem shouldn't abandon me in Mitzrayim in Egypt. And so there's a certain level, and we know that Menashe, the king Menashe, who was many, many hundreds of years later, did terrible things in the Jewish people, brought idolatry into the Jewish people. So, and even though he was the son of a righteous king, but still he himself wasn't righteous. And so it's a challenging day today, let's put it that way. And here's a prayer. In other words, it's challenging in the fact that we could go either way in terms of Menashe. It could be a prayer that Hashem shouldn't abandon us, or a prayer that Hashem should keep us holy and keep us loving Eretz Yisrael. And so let me read to you from the tefillah that the Sephardim say by the Nissan. The Sephardim, the Eidot HaMizrach, they have a beautiful tefillah by all the Nissan. It's very, very long, and afterwards they say tefillah for Aliyat Nishamot, etc. And here's what it says here, the Tefillah for Menashe. Uchashem shenisita liyisrael et kol amalam. Shenishita liyisrael et kol amalam. Vasirati misevel shichma Mitzrayim be'emimay mizman b'zchut Menashe. Since you, Hashem, lifted the Jewish people up and recognized all of the hard work that we did, and you saved us from the sevel, from the suffering of Mitzrayim because of Menashe. So to Hashem, don't abandon us in this long golus that we're in right now. So that's the first feeling. You took us out of Mitzrayim, and part of the taking of us out of Mitzrayim and saving us was because of the tribe of Menashe, because of Menashe himself, who was Yosef Tzadik's right hand man when he was ruling, and because of the tribe of Menashe, who aimed and tried to be holy. So too, don't abandon us in this long golus that we're in now, and don't allow us to be now here. The Sephardic Siddur, the Eidah HaMizrach Siddur, is making a play on words. The word Menashe, the root of it is nosha. Nosha means to abandon, or to feel hopeless. That's what Yosef Tzaddik, when he said that, he said it in that way. But also, it says in Tehillim that there's a place one second. It says in Tehillim that there's a place called Eretz Nishiyah. That means a land that is so hopeless that we feel like there's nothing that we can succeed in. That's called Eretz Nishiyah. And so he says, Lo tiyelo, it shouldn't be for us kinoshe be'eretz nishiyah, somebody who's hopeful, but in a land of hopefulness, of lack of hopefulness. Let me say that again. Sorry. Kinoshe be'eretz nishiyah. Nishiyah means a place of abandonment, a place of no hope. So the tefillah is, the Jewish people should not be like hopeful people who are living in a land where there's no hope for ever succeeding and forever spiritual elevation. We shouldn't be like that. That's part of the tefillah that the Sephardim say. So I want to tie that into something from the Rabbi Yanuka Tzaddik, who in his Haggada, at the very end of the Haggada. For those of you who have the Haggada, it's not published. You have to. I was very, very privileged to get it. This Haggada. It's not in the stores. You have to get it from the shul. And sorry, I can't even do that for you this year because it's just too close to Pesach. But I just took this out over Shabbos to start to learn the Haggada. And I want to read to you in the very end of the Haggada where he has his teachings on Derechei Geula, the way that we will be redeemed, the ways of redemption. And so he says something very fascinating here. He says that, I'll read it to you. When the Jewish people saw how cruel the Egyptians were and how they enslaved us. Now, you know that it was decreed that we would be slaves, that we would be exiled into a land that's not ours. But it was up to the end. It turned out that land was Egypt. And it turned out that the way that we were going to be in this exile for 400 years, that was a promise given to Avraham Avinu. It turns out that the manner that nation would treat us was up to the nation. So why was Egypt punished so badly? Because they treated us with cruelty. So when the Jewish people saw this, they realized, we realized how Egypt and the culture that was at that time in the world, the most elevated, the most powerful culture, the most powerful nation in the world, but essentially they were cruel, they were horrible people. And when we realized that, but we came to that realization when we were still enslaved to them. And so we couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, we weren't disgusted. We weren't disgusted by the Egyptians and by their and by their behavior. Why? Why weren't we disgusted by the Egyptians and by their behavior? Because we were underneath their servant. We were serving them. We were enslaved to them. So we didn't have time. We didn't have the power to be repulsed by the behavior of the Egyptians. So Hashem had to expand our minds. But Hashem wanted it to be that when we would finally be free of the Egyptians, we would look back and we would say, "Well, I was in love with that culture. I was impressed with the power of Egypt. I was impressed with the way that the Egyptians lived and with the way the Egyptians their whole culture, right? And I wanted to be like them. The problem is that I was enslaved underneath them, so I couldn't be like them because they wouldn't let me. But I really looked up to them. That's what happened when we were enslaved. And Hashem then slowly showed us that the way that they were enslaving us and the way that they were hosting us in their country was so cruel, was so debased, was so disgusting, that Hashem wanted us to be disgusted with their culture, so that when we would finally be free, we wouldn't have any desire to be like them. And rather we would be disgusted by them, we would be separated by them. We would be nivdalim prushim midarkam v'deyoteim shel hamitzrayim. We would separate ourselves, and we would want to be absolutely have nothing to do with the manner of the culture of the Egyptians. That's why Hashem showed us their cruelty, and that's one of the reasons why they were punished so severely. And Hashem wanted to show us, you see this culture that you were so looking up to, that you saw because of, we know the Egyptians, the biblical Egyptians were very scientific. They were very powerful. They were very rich. They were very whatever. And the Jewish people looked up to them. They were like, whoa, we were in awe of them, because here we were, a family. We were a family that was just beginning to become a nation. And we didn't yet have, we certainly didn't, we were not in our own land. We didn't have power. We didn't have political anything. We didn't have any of the things that the Egyptians had. And so on a certain level, we admired them. And Hashem wanted to show us how they are not to be admired at all. And so like today's day of Menashe, where it's the prayer that we have for us, the prayer, the tefillah that we say is, Hashem, don't abandon me in the land, in the world that is so hopeless, that is has such a lack of promise and of goodness and of spirituality. Don't abandon me to these ideas, because it's very easy for a person to get lost in the exile. Listen, we're all English speakers here, basically. So we're all in Baruch Hashem. Hashem did me the greatest favor in the universe and brought me here to Eretz Yisrael. But all of us are on a certain level coming from exile lands. We're coming from the lands of the Goyim. And it's almost impossible when you see, let's say, for example, they would say the joke, which is a terrible joke, but I'll say it, but I'm saying it right now it's just a joke, it's not real. How do you make $1 million in Israel is when you come with $2 million. That's how you make $1 million. In other words, when you look at the convenience of Chutz La'aretz, the convenience of it, I know I'm from America originally. And so when I think about the Pesach stores and what they have for sale there, I remember one year going in when I lived here and I was visiting before, and the Pesach store was already open. I came back to Eretz Yisrael, I think, for Pesach, or maybe not, I don't remember. But I couldn't believe and this is years and years ago, I couldn't believe the amount of products that were available in this Pesach store. It was, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so it's definitely convenient, physically convenient. It's easier sometimes, people say. But we have to remember that the culture of the world is not for us. We're not supposed to look up to them. We're supposed to be able to chachma bagoyim taminu. You're allowed to realize that they have certain scientific and economic advantages, etc. But don't get enslaved to that. Recognize that without Torah, without mitzvot, without holiness, There's nothing for us in this world. That's today. That's the day of Menashe. That's today. That's the energy of today, is to recognize that and to thank Hashem that we're here and that we have our own. We have our own. We don't need anybody else's holidays. We don't need anybody else's celebrations. We don't need anybody else's morality. That's the basic concept of today. So I'm going to wish you a good day and a successful day. It's Yom Rishon. It's the first day of the week. And everyone today, this is they're saying the week of the crunch, meaning everybody who hasn't done Pesach yet, who hasn't turned over the kitchen and hasn't finished the house. This is the day, this is the week. Today is the first day of that week. In America, when I lived in America and I was working here, Baruch Hashem, they gave us a week off from teaching, to prepare for Pesach. But in America, I remember the Sundays of the weeks before Pesach were the days where you got from morning to evening. You did everything as much as you could. So you should be successful in whatever you have to do today for Pesach. And you should be happy and do everything with simcha and with joy. Remember, we learned, but I'll say it again, everything that we do for Pesach, we're creating angels. And those are the angels that are going to be sitting with us and surrounding us at the Seder. So everything is going to be put music on and do everything with energy and happiness and gratitude. And know that we're going to reach on, Hashem gives us gifts. Hashem loves us. Geula is, what is Geula in a short version is recognizing how Hashem loves us. That's the short version of Geula, recognizing into the deepest part of our being that Hashem loves us. So Hashem should help us to recognize that, to remember that, and to live with that forever and ever. And especially this week, B'ezrat Hashem, you should all have a successful week. Now I have to turn that off. Okay, so now this. Okay, bye, sweetie, please.